1 in every 10 BMWs sold is an X1, and that figure's set to rise as the compact SUV segment continues to grow. This improved version of the F48 Series Mark II model aims to capitalise on this sector's popularity, providing potential Qashqai class buyers with a premium badged option that's now an even classier choice. Efficiency, practicality and cabin quality are all strong points, plus there's now the option of plug-in hybrid power if you want it. So will this revitalised X1 continue to hit this segment's sweet spot? That's what we're here to find out.
Today, it's hard to imagine a BMW lineup without an X-Series range of performance-minded SUV models. The Bavarian brand calls these SAVs, or sports activity vehicles, and these days they account for over a fifth of the company's worldwide sales, with the starting point of the lineup the model we're going to look at here. A substantially improved version of the F48 series second generation X1. Clearly, this is a car provided to get customers onto the first rung of a ladder that the Munich maker hopes will lead on to ownership of larger and faster X2, X3, X4, X5, X6 or even X7 models. But it's also there to give BMW something that its larger Audi Q5-sized X3 design is too heavy and expensive to deliver, namely entry into the volume part of the SUV market, specifically here the mid-size segment. Like its close rivals, the Audi Q3 and the Mercedes GLA, this is the kind of car BMW hopes you'll want if you need a crossover-sized car like a Nissan Qashqai, a Volkswagen Tiguan or a Ford Kuga, but would like it with a smarter badge. These days, this is an important niche for a premium maker, and to begin with, BMW rather struggle to credibly fill it. The original E84 series first generation X1 of 2009 was, well, very average. Based on an old fifth generation version of BMW's 3 Series touring estate, it looked odd and had to carry around a rear-wheel drive platform that compromised the space and practicality that a car of this kind really ought to have. Importantly, though, it was one of the earliest arrivals in this segment, so sold well anyway. But by 2015, with premium competitors piling into this sector, a far more competitive proposition was required, and this F48 series second generation model provided it. Redundant rear-driven mechanicals were ditched in favour of the high-tech UKL chassis the brand had created for its 2 Series 5-door models, and the third-generation Mini hatch, which provided the perfect platform for a considerably more sophisticated X1. Buyers have responded, and this car has sold in its hundreds of thousands. In 2018 alone, almost 280,000 X1 models found new owners, which made this car the segment's sales leader. Indeed, such has been the interest that BMW has also produced a sportier version based on the same mechanicals, badged the X2. But the Bavarian maker is well aware that the competition is gaining ground. 2017 saw the arrivals of key segment rivals, the Volvo XC40 and the Jaguar E-PACE. A year later, the second-generation Audi Q3 arrived alongside the new Lexus UX. And all these contenders must also consider a new generation version of the Mercedes GLA. Hence the need for a significant package of X1 changes to keep pace, creating the car we're going to look at here. It's smarter inside and out, better connected, and there's even now the option of a plug-in variant. Sounds promising. Let's check out this rejuvenated X1. Don't primarily buy a compact SUV of this kind to throw it about, though if you do so here, you'll actually find that this car is slightly more interesting to drive than most of its class counterparts. Why? Well, because all the key elements are in place for a decent driving experience, namely a low centre of gravity, a wide track, optimised weight, a stiff body structure, and, as you'd expect from a BMW, near perfect 50-50 weight distribution. It all explains why body roll in an X1 is much better controlled than you'd expect it to be in a high-sided crossover of this sort, even through the tight bends that'll see the standard torque vectoring performance control system diverting torque to the wheel that can best use it. Don't get us wrong, this car isn't one you'd take out and drive just for the fun of it, but if you do have to push on in this BMW, there's a bit more to the experience than is the case with most rivals. It's certainly more involving than a Q3 or a GLA. As before, the engine you choose will dictate whether your X1 is available in either front-driven S-Drive guise or all-wheel driven X-Drive form. Either way, this car will end up being front-driven most of the time, which still sounds odd to be saying about a model from a brand that built its reputation on the joys of rear-wheel drive. That's because the mini-hatch-derived UK L platform this car sits upon demands that approach, and also because where X-Drive is employed, it is, as usual, a part-time system that only ever sends traction to the rear when either axle senses wheel slip. BMW hasn't done much with the twin-power turbo 3- and 4-cylinder engine range as part of the most recent changes, though there are now fewer options than there were back at this car's original launch in 2015. By the time of the introduction of the facelift version of this F48 series model, the mainstream part of the lineup had been slimmed down to merely 2 fundamental levels of X1 ownership. The volume part of the range, as before, offers around 140 to 150 horsepower and concentrates on either the 18i petrol version we're trying here, or alternatively the 18D diesel. Or, if you like the idea of around 190 horsepower in your X1 and can afford a bit more, your dealer will point you towards the 20i petrol or 20D diesel derivatives. At the time of this test, that approach meant there was no place for the 2 variants that previously bookended the diesel part of the X1 range, the 116 horsepower 3-cylinder 1.5 litre S-Drive 16D and the 231 horsepower 4-cylinder 2 litre X-Drive 25D. If, as is likely, you end up deciding between the 18i or the 18D, you'll find that both these X1 models are quite different in character. The 18i comes only in front-driven S-Drive form and uses a 3-cylinder 1.5 litre 140 horsepower petrol unit that can be mated to a dual-clutch 7-speed auto transmission if you don't want the standard 6-speed manual gearbox. The 18D, in contrast, comes in either S-Drive front-driven or X-Drive all-wheel driven forms, uses a 4-cylinder 2 litre 150 horsepower diesel unit, and, as an alternative to the standard 6-speed stick shifter, offers an optional 8-speed auto of the more conventional torque converter variety. We'd probably recommend finding extra for the 18D. With 350 Nm of torque, it's got over 50% more pulling power than the base petrol variant. You'd never know that to look at the headline performance stats of the 2 models. Both make 62 miles an hour in around 9.5 seconds, on the way to 127 miles an hour flat out. But in day-to-day driving, the extra grunt of the diesel engine makes a real difference. Is it worth finding the extra money for the more powerful 20i and 20D variants? Well, we'd think twice, because both can only be had in all-wheel drive X-Drive form, and with auto transmission there's quite a step up in price. It's worth noting, though, that because the X-Drive 20D uses the brand's 2-litre twin-power diesel unit in a 190 horsepower state of tune, which boosts torque to 400 Nm, that variant has a significantly higher braked towing capacity than other models in the range, rated at 2 tonnes. The X-Drive 20D gets from rest to 62 miles an hour in 7.4 seconds en route to 136 and uses the same 8-speed automatic as is optional on the 18D. For the minority interest X-Drive 20i petrol version, the figures are 7.8 seconds and 140 miles an hour. This variant fitted with a faster shifting sport version of the 18i model's dual clutch Steptronic auto gearbox. On the subject of performance and all-wheel drive in an X1, we should finish our perusal of engine options by mentioning that there is another very different powertrain option available that delivers both these things in a rather different way. The clever X1 X-Drive 25e petrol-electric plug-in hybrid uses the same powertrain we've already seen in the Mini Countryman PHEV, and BMW's 2 Series Active Tourer 225xe. It mates a 124 horsepower version of the 89 model's 1.5 litre 3-cylinder petrol engine, driving the front wheels with a 95 horsepower electric motor, which powers those at the rear and draws its energy from a rechargeable 9.7 kilowatt-hour lithium-ion battery. Keep that topped up and a 31-mile WLTP rated all-electric driving range is possible, though not if you push the limits of the 84 mile an hour all-electric top speed. 3 extra settings feature in the xDrive 25e's driving performance control system: Max eDrive, which keeps progress all electric; the Auto eDrive setting, which switches between power sources as necessary; and Save Battery, which reserves your all-electric battery range until you particularly need it, say in urban motoring at the end of a motorway trip. If you can ignore this focus on frugality and use all of this plug-in hybrid model's performance, you'll find that there's plenty of it, thanks to a combined system output of 217 horsepower and 385 newton meters of torque. 62 miles an hour from rest takes just 7 seconds, and top speed is 119 miles an hour. Whatever engine you choose in your X1, you'll find it designed to work with a standard vehicle dynamic system that these days is very familiar to BMW drivers. Drive performance control, the rocker switch for which you'll find down here by the gear stick. If you're coming to this car from another premium brand, you're probably also familiar with this kind of thing, a setup that allows you to tweak the steering, throttle and stability control system thresholds depending on the operating mode you select. Gear change times 2 if you've specified the auto gearbox. Ignore drive performance control or select its most relaxed comfort or efficient Eco Pro settings, and the travelling experience in this car, though very comfortable, isn't especially memorable. Push the rocker switch forward into sport though, and the reaction you get immediately feels keener and more alert, even including artificial blips as you downshift through the gears. Sport also adds extra weight to the steering, though in a way that makes the helm of this car feel rather artificially heavy. Drive performance control can also alter ride quality, though only if you happen to have chosen a top-spec M Sport variant and have paid extra for adaptive suspension. If you do happen to have gone for M Sport trim, we'd suggest that option to be almost essential, because otherwise you'll be stuck with the firmer M Sport suspension that's part of the standard spec with this trim level, a damping setup that most buyers will find rather over firm. Even the standard suspension on mainstream X1 models, a multi-link rear setup, can sometimes get a little unsettled over rougher roads. It's a little stiffer than is the norm for a small SUV of this kind, especially if you opt to have run-flat tyres fitted. But it's nothing you can live with, and there's little to criticise about the damping of this car at highway speeds, though at a cruise you might well notice slightly higher than average levels of tyre roar. We should finish with a word about the off-piste capability of the xDrive intelligent four-wheel drive system, should your chosen X1 happen to have it. As you might expect, given that this is a crossover rather than a fully fledged SUV, there isn't that much. Still, the 183mm ride height and the modest 17.7 degree approach angle and 20.6 degree departure angle should be enough to deal with the steep, snowy driveways and muddy car parks that potential owners will want the xDrive system to be able to negotiate. The X1 hasn't always looked this good. The first generation version was a bit of an ugly duckling, visually compromised by the need to accommodate rear-wheel drive underpinnings borrowed from an old BMW 3 Series touring estate. This primarily front-driven F48 series car, first launched in 2015, was a much more appealing effort, styled by young Australian designer Calvin Luke. As part of the facelift changes we've been reviewing here, it's been made a touch more imposing and purposeful, which is something you particularly notice here at the front. If you happen to be familiar with the original version of this Mark II model, the first thing you'll notice is this new larger grille, which sees the two kidney-shaped intakes now meeting in the middle. The lights flanking this aperture are different too, piercing full LED beams featuring for the first time. Things have also been spruced up lower down. The previous rather bland arrangement, circular fog lamps and blanked off corner outlets, replaced by a more confident intake design with smaller rectangular LED fog lamps, all of which has necessitated a shapelier redesigned bumper. The changes made at the rear are harder to spot, primarily the subtly restyled LED lamps that ditch the previous old-school orange elements for clear indicator units, and redesigned inlays on this rear apron that adopt body-coloured finishing. Otherwise, it's as you were, with styling intended to visually widen the car, provide more of a link to the SUV X models further up the range, and create the illusion that this X1 sits higher off the road than it actually does. From the side, as before, the roofline silhouette tapers gently away from front to rear, though of course not as distinctly as is the case with the more sportily orientated alternative X2 model. Not much else has changed either. The profile's still dominated by a sharp swage line that extends from the front wing to the rear light, plus there's this more subtle crease further down that gives the flanks some shape, with a frontward section that arches up from the sill into the front wheel arch. Roof rails and black wheel arch cladding are standard across the range, which offers buyers the option of wheel sizes ranging from 17 to 19 inches. We've got 18-inch M light alloy double-spoke rims here. 4 fresh alloy rim designs have been introduced as part of the changes made to this facelifted model, and while we're covering the detail stuff, we'll also tell you that 3 fresh exterior colours are available too. Of course, as usual, what's more important is what you can't see, and this F48 Series X1 was the third BMW to make use of the lighter, stiffer UKL platform that the company's developed for its modern-day range of front-driven models, most notably the third generation Mini. Right, let's take a seat up front, pausing on the way to note a neat change made to this driver-side exterior mirror, which now projects a two-tone LED X1 image onto the ground when the car's unlocked, at which point the door handle recesses also illuminate. It's a kind of nice touch you'd want from a premium model, and you'd hope to find plenty more once inside. As before, this is the part of the X1 that we think will really sell this car to potential buyers. It's light, spacious and beautifully appointed, certainly a world removed from the cramped, cheap-feeling cabin of the pre-2015 first-generation E84 series model, if you happen to be coming into this car from one of those. Look around and the high-quality layered fascia is much as it is in the other BMW that shares this one's Mini-derived underpinnings, the 2 Series Active Tourer. It's black on its upper section and adopts the car's individual upholstery colour lower down. And it curves around the cabin in a symmetrical wave, garnished with textured aluminium, satin chrome inlays and carefully chosen splashes of bright work. The lower driving area around the gear stick is separated from the front passenger space by this neat leather-stitched bar, and if your car has the lighting package that's standard on plusher models, you'll like the en vogue vodka bar lighting strips used on the dash and door panels. The changes made as part of the facelift package are really of the detail kind, things like new upholstery options and the addition of contrast stitching on the instrument panel. Of more significance is the adoption of a larger central media screen for the iDrive infotainment system, which takes pride of place in the middle of the fascia, set high enough up the dash to allow you to refer to it without taking your eyes too far off the road. Previously, this monitor was 6.5 inches as standard, with a larger 8.8-inch display available as an option. Now 8.8 inches is the default size, with this BMW Navigation Plus 10.25-inch touchscreen display available at extra cost. Your main point of access to either setup is this circular rotary dial down by the gear stick, and you also get a touch-sensitive pad on top of the controller that allows you to input addresses using handwriting. We like the simple, intuitive way that the iDrive system works, with menus that can be customised to your taste. The monitor is divided into simple connected drive, media, radio, navigation, communication and my vehicle segments. The connected drive menu is particularly informative, delivering a range of downloadable apps and access to BMW's suite of online services designed to enhance your journey by sending you up-to-date information while you're at the wheel. Everything from weather and latest news to a rainfall radar and an online search system. Provision for the kind of smartphone mirroring systems that even quite cheap cars now usually provide is disappointing though. Apple CarPlay is only optional and you have to renew a subscription for it every 3 years. Android Auto can't be had at all. Are there other issues? Well, not many. It's annoying to find that lumbar adjustment costs extra with all trim levels, but assuming you have it, it's difficult to imagine how you could fail to get comfortable in this car, thanks to the amount of movement and adjustability provided by both seat and wheel. Go for M Sport trim and you get this lovely leather-stitched wheel, which is brilliant, thick and grippy, but at some angles can sometimes obscure the bottom of the instrument binnacle. The dials themselves, though, are of the usual crystal clear BMW variety, featuring digital displays in a traditional gauge layout. Not that you'll be looking at them very much if you've opted for the optional head-up display. What about all-round visibility? Well, there are pluses and minuses here. The driving position's certainly better than it would be in, say, a 1 Series hatch, thanks to that slightly raised seating position. And aiding further with this is a low-mounted dashboard that doesn't interrupt your view across the bonnet, but the size and positioning of the front A-pillars can slightly obscure your view at junctions, and the upswept rear window line can slightly get in the way of your view rearwards, so you'll be glad of the standard all-round parking sensors. We've no complaints about cabin practicality though. The cup holders are deep enough to hold really big takeaway cups and sit within this good-sized, smartly lidded cubby at the bottom of the centre stack that also incorporates a 12-volt port and a USB slot. The centre armrest, positioned over a storage area between the seats with a USB port, conceals a good place to store your phone. The glove box is a reasonable size, and the bottle holders in the doors are big enough to hold 1 litre water bottles. BMW has forgotten to include an overhead sunglasses compartment, but there's also a cubby by the driver's right knee and ticket clips in the sun visors. Time to take a seat in the back, with access into the rear cabin being straightforward thanks to these reasonably large door apertures. And once inside, well, there's not much to complain about by class standards. There are cars in this segment that offer slightly more room for legs and heads, Volkswagen's Tiguan for instance, but not many. And this BMW's cause is enhanced by the availability of a sliding rear bench, which offers 130mm of back and forth adjustment, though you have to pay extra for it. Reclining rear seat backs are standard, and scalloped front seat backs free up extra space for your knees, making it possible for one 6-footer to sit behind another in reasonable comfort. As with most crossovers in this class, there's still really only comfortable space for 2 adults. Still, if you do need to take a third person, you'll find that this central transmission tunnel is set low enough not to get in the way too much. Practical touches include central vents above twin USB ports, overhead coat hooks, ISOFIX fastenings for the outer 2 seating positions, and decently sized bins indoors featuring classy stitched panels. Let's take a look out back, where first impressions are encouraging. For a start, you get an electrically operated tailgate as standard, which is usually an extra cost feature in this class. And this one can be embellished with extra cost comfort access, which allows you to raise it by waving your foot beneath the bumper if, key in pocket, you approach the car with both hands laden down with bags. Once the powered hatch rises, you're provided with a very reasonable 508 litres of cargo capacity. To give you some context, you're looking at the same sort of space as you get in BMW's 3 Series Touring Estate, and only 42 litres less than is provided by the brand's supposedly much larger X3 model. As for direct market rivals, well, you're talking of a cargo area that's 22 litres smaller than that of a rival Audi Q3, but 36 litres larger than a Range Rover Evoque. Bear in mind that capacity will fall to around 450 litres if you opt for the xDrive 25e plug-in hybrid variant. The luggage bay in conventional models will offer you this useful underfloor compartment, but only courtesy of the fact that BMW doesn't supply a spare wheel, just a fiddly tyre repair kit, something we disapprove of on any kind of SUV class vehicle. That being the case, we'd really want the run flat tyre option on this car. In terms of practicality, there's a 12-volt socket and a netted storage area on the right-hand side, plus the usual 4 tie-down points, a left-hand tensioner strap, a recessed area on the left, and a couple of bag hooks. Need more room? Well, if you're simply struggling to shut the tailgate because of bulky luggage on, say, an airport run, you'll find the way that you can put the rear seat backs into a slightly more vertical position very helpful. If the item in question is merely long and thin, like a set of skis, it may suffice merely to flatten the middle part of this standard 40-20-40 split-folding rear backrest. If, though, you really need to supersize your space, then it's obviously a case of pushing forward the rear bench. If you've paid extra for the sliding back seat, a 1,550 litre cargo area is revealed. That's 40 litres more than you get from the kind of BMW 3 Series Touring Estate that's 262mm longer in length. In this improved form, this second generation X1 range is priced from around £29,000, with asking figures that stretch up to and potentially just beyond the £40,000 mark. There are 4 trim levels: SE, Sport, X-Line, and as here, M Sport, and each one with its own unique styling and equipment package. Your starting point in the range will be either the petrol-powered 18i, 140 horsepower model, which comes only in S-Drive front-driven form, or the diesel-powered 18D, 150 horsepower model, which can be had with either S-Drive or 4x4 X-Drive forms, the latter requiring a £1,500 premium. Automatic transmission is an option with both these power plants, either a dual clutch unit for the 3-cylinder 18i costing £1,350 extra, or a torque converter sport auto box for the 18D costing £1,600 more. Go for the 2 more powerful engines, as here, the 20i petrol with 192 horsepower, or the 20D with 190 horsepower, and there's less choice. You have to have the xDrive 4x4 setup, and you also have to have auto transmission, a sport version of the dual clutch auto for the 20i, and the torque converter sport auto box for the 20D. The final option is the first of what will doubtless be many plug-in options in this class, the plug-in hybrid X1 xDrive 25e variant. Like all hybrids, it's auto, of course, and features the same powertrain used in the Mini Countryman plug-in model, namely a 94 horsepower electric motor connected to a 9.7 kilowatt-hour battery and mated with a 123 horsepower petrol engine. Before we get on to rivals, let's price position this car for you within BMW's own lineup, pointing out as we go that the sportier version of this body style, badged the X2, uses exactly the same mechanicals and costs around £1,000 more. Anyway, for a family buyer, you can see the appeal of the X1, given that it gives you most of what you get in BMW's mid-sized X3 SUV, and yet at a model-for-model cost that's around £7,000 less. You could also argue that it gives you most of what you'd get in a BMW 3 Series Touring Estate for a model-for-model cost that's between £2,000 and £5,000 less, depending on the engine and drivetrain combination you're looking at. That's the positive spin anyway. The other way of looking at this is to note that a BMW 1 Series hatch offers all the same engineering at a model-for-model saving of around £4,000. As ever, it depends what you want. Let's get on to the question of how mainstream X1 variants square up to potential premium C-segment SUV sector rivals from other premium brands. If you're buying in this class, you'll almost certainly be considering this car alongside its two key German premium brand competitors, the Audi Q3 and the Mercedes GLA, both of which will easily cost you £2,000 to £2,500 more than an equivalent X1. So that's a good start. What about the other premium badged C-segment SUV options you might be looking at? Two JLR models, the Jaguar E-PACE and the Range Rover Evoque, readily spring to mind. Both are a little smaller inside than this X1, and both are quite difficult to directly compare to this BMW, mainly because you can't have either in front-driven petrol form, which is where the volume is in this segment. To fuel from the green pump in either an E-PACE or an Evoque, you have to pay the extra for a slightly more powerful engine and four-wheel drive. Of course, you might want that, and if so, you'll find that in comparison to an X1 xDrive 20i model like this one, an E-PACE P200 would cost about the same as this BMW, while an Evoque P200 would cost around £2,500 more. You can have both the Jag and the Evoque in 150 PS front-driven form if you're happy with a diesel engine. A comparably specified front-driven E-PACE D150 diesel would probably save you around £1,500 on an equivalent X1 S-Drive 18D and would be better to drive but would cost significantly more to run. A base-spec front-driven Evoque D150 will cost you about the same as that X1 S-Drive 18D, but again would be pricier to run and, when specified to the same level as the BMW, would cost you significantly more. We'd also bring four other premium brand C-segment SUVs to your attention. One might already be on your shopping list. Volvo's XC40 is a good product that might be tempting to a potential buyer of this BMW, and it'll cost you about the same as an X1, but it isn't as good to drive as this Munich model and has a much smaller boot. You might be less aware of the Lexus UX, which can be yours for a very similar sum to that being asked for this BMW. You can't directly compare a UX to an X1 because the UX comes only with a self-charging petrol-electric hybrid engine, but we think it'd be an interesting alternative, though it's considerably less versatile and has a smaller boot. The slightly bigger Lexus NX, also only offered as a hybrid, is slightly more practical in that regard, but that car's pricing starts at around £36,000. Some might also suggest the compact Mercedes GLB to be another potential rival, but that car's primarily offered in 7-seat form, which means that it appeals to a slightly different market from that being targeted here. For reference, the only 5-seat GLB on offer comes only in top-spec 220D form for around £42,000, around £5,000 more than an equivalent top-spec X1 xDrive 20D. Those are all your really direct alternatives to an X1, but if you want to widen your search amongst mid-sized SUVs in this price bracket, you absolutely can. Toyota's RAV4, these days only offered as a hybrid, sells in the £30,000 to £35,000 bracket for those who want to trade a premium badge for extra engine technology. Otherwise, if you're spending that kind of sum on an SUV crossover of this kind, you could get yourself a really top-spec version of a smaller mid-size model like a Nissan Qashqai, a Seat Ateca, a Ford Kuga or a Volkswagen T-Roc. B, a mid to top-spec version of a slightly larger mid-sized model like a Honda CR-V, a Volkswagen Tiguan or a Mazda CX-5. Or C, a similarly equipped version of a 7-seat mid-sized SUV like a Volkswagen Tiguan Allspace or a DS7 Crossback. Lots and lots of choices then. If, having considered them, you conclude that it is an X1 that you really want, then you're going to need to know exactly what's included in the standard spec. Well, let's see. Even the thriftiest SE trim level gives you plenty. To be specific, 17-inch V-spoke alloy wheels, LED headlamps, LED front fog lights, an automatic tailgate, roof rails, park distance control, front and rear parking sensors, heated power mirrors and alarm, auto headlamps and wipers, and a chrome-finished exhaust pipe. Inside, the 40-20-40 split folding rear backrest is standard fit, plus there are niceties like 2-zone automatic air conditioning, cruise control with a speed limiter and a sport multifunction leather trimmed steering wheel. In addition, there's the drive performance control system that via Eco Pro, Comfort and Sport modes allows you to alter throttle response, steering feel and on an auto model, gear change timing, all of it better suiting the way you want to drive. You'll want to know about infotainment too. Well, all X1 models come with the usual BMW iDrive system that in standard form now features an 8-inch colour screen, your access point for Bluetooth with audio streaming, navigation and a decent quality 6-speaker DAB stereo. Plus, you get a full suite of BMW connected drive services, including teleservices and real-time traffic information, along with the brand's suite of online services that give you access to things like news reports, weather forecasts and a whole range of BMW apps. In addition, the system will even read out text messages to you. Unfortunately, and rather unforgivably on a car of this price, Apple CarPlay smartphone mirroring costs extra and Android Auto can't be had at all. Talking of being connected, all X1 buyers will be offered use of a clever BMW connected app that can learn your mobility routines, read your calendar and even prompt you when to leave for scheduled journeys. It'll get familiar with your most frequently travelled routes and memorise them as future destinations. It even has a share live trip status feature that allows the driver to share their current location and time of arrival with business partners, friends or family. Plus, the app can do all the things that these remote apps usually tend to do, help you find your car if you've forgotten where you've parked it, and can even remotely lock or unlock the doors. All of that comes with standard SE trim. Ideally, though, you'd want to dress this car up a little. And the next trim level up, Sport, begins to do that with 18-inch double-spoke alloy wheels, high-gloss shadow line exterior trim, front inlets with a high-gloss black finisher, and front bumper underbody protection. Inside, Sport trim gets you sport seats, contrast stitching on the dash, LED ambient lighting, and upholstery that's a smart combination of anthracite cloth and Sensatec man-made leather. If you can afford more, the X-Line variants look a little sleeker thanks to an aluminium-fronted kidney grille, a satin aluminium finish for the exterior trim and roof rails, silver finishing for the front air inlets and rear underbody protection plate, and bi-colour Y-spoke finishing for the 18-inch wheels. Inside, X-Line models gain real Dakota leather upholstery with contrast stitching, front seat heating, power folding mirrors, and BMW's classy extended lighting package, including LED ambient lighting in the door trim. That only leaves top M Sport trim, which is what we have here. Now, these variants recognisably stand out from the others thanks to their 18-inch M Light alloy double-spoke wheels, a dark shadow finish for the bumpers and high-gloss shadow line exterior trim that extends to the roof rails. There's also a standard M aerodynamic body style kit, which includes enlarged front air intakes and a body coloured finish for things like the underbody protection plate and the wheel arch trims. Inside, the main additions are sports seats, an anthracite headliner, M-designated door sill plates and the chunky M Sport leather steering wheel that BMW buyers like so much. Now, bear in mind that with this top trim level, firmer M Sport suspension comes as standard. So it's just as well that this is the only trim level in the range that allows you to pay extra for adaptive damping, allowing you to alter ride quality to suit your preference. A large proportion of X1 M Sport buyers further tick the box for the M Sport Plus pack, which includes unique 19-inch light alloy wheels, M Sport brakes, sun protection glass, M Sport steering, M Sport seatbelts and a Harman Kardon upgraded speaker system. Which brings us on to options, and as usual on a BMW there are plenty. The most important thing we think you need to order on this car is the sliding rear bench, which costs £350 more and really ought to be standard like it is on a Volkswagen Tiguan or say a smaller Renault Captur SUV. Beyond that, A good starting point here lies with the various packs, branded either Comfort or Tech, and there are a couple of each. Comfort Pack 1 is only for SE and Sport model customers and includes power folding mirrors, front seat heating and extended lighting. Comfort Pack 2 is offered across the range and includes steering wheel heating, powered front seat adjustment and what BMW calls comfort access, basically keyless entry and gesture control for the tailgate. Both the Tech Packs are available across the whole X1 lineup. Tech Pack 1 includes a reversing assist camera, enhanced Bluetooth with a wireless charging mat, Wi-Fi hotspot preparation and adaptive LED headlights that adapt themselves to road conditions. Tech Pack 2, meanwhile, gives you a head-up display and the BMW Navigation Plus setup with its larger 10.25-inch centre dash screen. Bear in mind that many of the various pack features we've just mentioned can be ordered as individual options if you prefer. And extra cost features beyond those just mentioned? Well, if you think you or your partner might struggle with slotting this SUV into tight spaces, you could consider the Park Assist system, which automatically does it for you. You might also want front seat lumbar support, another thing that should be standard, the panoramic glass roof and the upgraded Harman Kardon loudspeaker system. We mentioned earlier that Apple CarPlay smartphone mirroring costs extra. Well, you can add that too, though bear in mind that all you get for the extra cash is a subscription that you'll have to renew after 3 years of use. On the plus side, the setup is wireless, so you won't have to mess around with unsightly leads. Practical extras included detachable tow bar, bike rack preparation, a luggage compartment separating net, and BMW's optional Trackstar stolen vehicle tracking system. Providing you've avoided base SE trim, you'll be able to specify run-flat tyres too. Alternatively, across the range you can add in a space-saver spare wheel if you don't want to be stuck by the side of the road fiddling with a tyre mobility kit the next time you have a puncture. On the diesel variants and on the base 18i model, you'll also be offered the option to upgrade to a slightly larger 61-litre fuel tank. On to aesthetics. Now, if you don't want your car's paintwork finished in the standard Alpine white or jet black solid shades, you're going to have to pay more for one of the extra cost metallic colours. There's also a special BMW individual Storm Bay metallic shade. To complete the effect, there's a bespoke selection of alloy wheels that vary from 17 to 19 inches in size, and you'll want to get the look of the interior right too. On SE and Sport models, you can add in full Dakota leather upholstery. Sport variants can have this with contrast stitching too. If you could avoid base SE trim, you'll be offered the chance to complete your X1's cabin with either brushed aluminium, fine line stream wood, fine oak or high gloss black. All those packages featuring pearl chrome finishing. Safety is, as you'd expect from a BMW, well accounted for, hence this car's full house 5-star Euro NCAP safety rating. You'd expect the basics, twin front, side and curtain airbags, plus front and rear ISOFIX child seat fastenings and the usual electronic assistance for traction and stability control, primarily DSC Plus stability control and DTC traction control. Plus, there's a performance control system that suppresses understeer in tight turns. That'll also see you experience extra traction from an electronic differential lock control system. There's plenty of braking peace of mind too, with the ABS system supplemented by fading compensation, CBC or cornering brake control, and a neat brake drying system that keeps the brake discs free of moisture in wet weather. Panic stops are aided by a brake assist system and advertised to following motorists by dynamic brake lights that flash a bright warning. You also get a multi-collision braking function that, in the event of an impact, will keep brake pressure applied until you come to a complete stop. We should also mention that all variants get what BMW calls an active guard system, based around forward collision warning technology. At over 30 miles an hour, the vehicle scans the road ahead for potential accident hazards, and if once detected, you'll be warned and the brakes preconditioned for maximum effectiveness. Should you be travelling at under 30 miles an hour and be not responding to a detected hazard, the brakes will automatically be applied, reducing the severity of any resulting accident and hopefully alleviating it altogether. Other neat safety features fitted as standard across the range include an alertness assistant that monitors you for signs of drowsiness, hill start assist to stop you from drifting backwards on uphill junctions, and hill descent control, which can ease you down slippery slopes. Best of all, we think, is the BMW emergency call with teleservices system, which in an accident can automatically alert the emergency services. This system not only gives them your exact GPS location, but also provides recovery personnel with information on your speed at point of impact, how hard the seatbelts were pulled, how many airbags burst, and so on. If you were to have a crash, it would all mean not only that the emergency teams would know exactly where you were, but also that they would arrive on the scene more prepared and ready to get you to safety than they could ever otherwise be. A potentially life-saving difference. Want to go further? Well, a key option is what BMW calls its Driving Assistant Plus pack, which gives you a whole range of extra camera-based safety features. There's front collision warning, which tells you if you're getting too close to the car in front, a high beam assistant system that'll automatically dip your headlights for you at night, lane departure warning to stop dozy drivers from veering out of their lane on the highway, and a speed limit information setup that pictures speed signs as you pass and displays them on the dash. In addition, the Driving Assistant Plus pack includes a couple of semi-autonomous driving features. Traffic jam assist can make congested roads a whole lot easier. This setup able to steer and move the car automatically at up to 24 miles an hour in traffic. And for highway use, you'll be glad of the active cruise control with a stop and go function that can automatically slow the car to a stop, then when appropriate, return it to cruising speed should you come across a motorway tailback. That last feature can be ordered separately if you like the sound of it. Basing this second generation X1 on a mini hatch platform has really paid off when it comes to issues of efficiency. As a result, BMW is able to claim class-leading fuel consumption and emissions figures across the range. So let's get specific with the 18i 3-cylinder petrol and 18D 4-cylinder diesel X1 derivatives that most buyers of this car choose. For variants of this kind, you'll find rival models delivering WLTP-rated CO2 figures that will generally be between 140 and 145 grams per kilometre. For this X1, in contrast, you're looking at 125 grams per kilometre of WLTP-rated CO2 for a manual S-Drive 18i variant, or 122 grams per kilometre in this auto form, and 113 grams per kilometre for a manual S-Drive 18D, or 114 grams per kilometre in auto form. Even the 4x4 X-Drive 18D only puts out 125 grams per kilometre, which falls to 122 in auto form. All of this will be a huge help to owners looking to reduce their running costs. This X1 is also class-leading when it comes to NEDC-rated combined cycle fuel consumption. The readings you get in this S-Drive 18i model, up to 42.8 mpg as a manual or up to 42.2 mpg as an auto, are only a percentage point or two ahead of its rivals. But the S-Drive 18D diesel has a clear advantage over the competition, returning up to 56.5 mpg as a manual or up to 53.3 mpg as an auto. To give you some perspective, for an equivalent base diesel Audi Q3 or Range Rover Evoque, you're looking at comparable figures in the low 40s. That's a big difference. For completion, we'll tell you that the 4x4 xDrive 18D X1 variant is officially NEDC rated at up to 51.4 mpg as a manual or up to 50.4 mpg as an auto. While we're about it, we'll give you the figures for the other two engines in the range. If you're looking at the 190 horsepower xDrive 20D derivative, then you can expect up to 50.4 mpg on the WLTP combined cycle and up to 123 grams per kilometre of NEDC rated CO2. Or, to put it another way, you can expect to be able to go around 10 miles further on every gallon that you would in a directly comparable Audi Q3 40 TDI and put out 23 grams per kilometre less CO2. The other automatic-only derivative in the mainstream range is the xDrive 20i petrol model, likely to suit lower mileage private buyers. Here you can expect up to 40.9 mpg and 129 grams per kilometre of CO2. If you want to do better, then you'll need to stump up for the clever xDrive 25xe petrol electric plug-in hybrid version. To recap the info we gave you in our driving experience section, this variant mates the S-Drive 18i model's 1.5 litre 3-cylinder petrol engine, driving the front wheels with a 95 horsepower electric motor, which powers those at the rear and draws its energy from a rechargeable 9.7 kilowatt hour lithium-ion battery placed beneath the rear seat. You'll need around 2.5 hours to recharge the car from a domestic power socket, but ideally you'd have a BMW i wall box installed in your garage, which can knock an hour off that figure and which can be programmed into off-peak electricity rates. When fully charged, the xDrive 25xe has a WLTP rated all-electric range of up to 31 miles before the little petrol engine cuts in, meaning that short urban trips can be completed with zero local emissions. That's if you select the Max eDrive option from this variant's bespoke drive performance control system that will keep the car in milk float mode. More typically, you'll be using the setup's auto eDrive setting, which switches between power sources as necessary. And there's also a save battery option, which reserves your all-electric battery range until you particularly need it, say in urban motoring at the end of a motorway trip. As for the xDrive 25e variant's quoted efficiency figures, well, as with any plug-in hybrid, you need to take these with something of a pinch of salt. But, for the record, they're quoted at 141.3 mpg for the WLTP-rated combined cycle and 43 grams per kilometre of NEDC-rated CO2. But let's get back to the conventional petrol and diesel X1 models that most customers will be choosing. Impressively, the figures being delivered here really aren't very different from those you'd get from an equivalent, more conventional, lower-riding BMW 3 Series touring estate. The emissions figures are almost the same as you get in that car, and the fuel reading would be only a few mpg behind, a legacy of the fact that an X1 is around 60 kilograms heavier. The effort that BMW has put into weight saving is in fact a significant reason for this car's impressive efficiency showing. Rivals like Volvo's XC40, Jaguar's E-PACE and the Range Rover Evoque are much heavier. So how has BMW managed that? Well, the aluminium used for the bonnet and sections of the suspension certainly plays its part in helping this car achieve its relatively light curb weight. A base X1 S-Drive 18i tips the scales at well under 1.5 tonnes. Plus, the intelligent four-wheel drive system used further up the range has been carefully developed with lightweight components and a clever electro-hydraulic multi-plate clutch that reduces torque losses to a minimum. As usual with a car of this kind, this is a part-time 4x4 setup that keeps you front-driven most of the time to save energy and fuel, only connecting with the back wheels when a lack of traction demands it. When you add to all of this the usual benefits of BMW's clever, efficient dynamics technology, you've got the potential to create that frugal set of running cost returns we just talked you through. The elements in the efficient dynamics package are these days copied by just about every other manufacturer in this segment, but the way the Munich maker has put them all together really seems to have hit the efficiency sweet spot. We're talking here of things like on-demand use of auxiliary units, electric power steering, low rolling resistance tyres, brake energy regeneration and an auto start-stop system to cut the engine when you don't need it, stuck in traffic or waiting at the lights. The auto transmissions also include a coasting function that disconnects the engine at cruising speeds until you need it. We should also mention aerodynamics, which inevitably play a key role when it comes to matters of efficiency. To that end, there's a sleek shape with smooth surfaced underbody panelling that creates a relatively slippery 0.32 CD drag factor. Of course, the driver must also play their part, so there's an optimum gear shift indicator on the dash and an Eco Pro mode you can select in the drive performance control system that'll focus all the car's systems on ultimate frugality. The extra economy created in that Eco Pro setting, BMW reckon it could be up to 20%, is fed back to the driver with in-car display showing the additional number of miles achieved. Finally, there's also an Eco Pro route option in the navigation system that'll plot your journey in the most efficient manner. In the My Vehicle Technology in Action part of the iDrive screen, you can also find a driving style analysis feature that rates your driving based on two criteria, anticipation and acceleration. And you'll be able to monitor how far your efforts towards frugality have taken you in a separate, efficient dynamic screen that graphically shows the economy figures you've achieved. What else? Well, as usual with a BMW, there's a condition-based service indicator on the dash to advise you when your car needs a garage visit, and you can check all of this using menus in the iDrive centre dash display, and the car will give you 4 weeks notice of when a check-up's needed, so you have plenty of time to book it. Less familiar to some buyers will be the clever tele-services feature that comes as part of the BMW connected drive services you can access through the iDrive infotainment system. Via this, before each service appointment is due, your X1 can automatically put in a teleservices call to your nominated BMW service centre, complete with detailed information on vehicle condition. You'll then get a call to arrange a service appointment, something you'll have already budgeted for if, at the point of original purchase, you opted for one of the two fixed cost service inclusive or service inclusive plus packages, which cover you for 5 years or 50,000 miles. With these, after a one-off payment, you'll have the peace of mind of knowing that all normal work on the car has been paid for during this period, including items such as oil, spark plugs and filters. Onto the warranty package. Now, BMW offers a warranty that lasts for 3 years, no matter how many miles you complete. As for residual values, well, industry specialists at CAP reckon these will be very strong indeed. Depending on specification, after 3 years of use, your X1 should still be worth just over 50% of what you originally paid for it. You'll struggle to find a class rival that can better that. And we'll finish with insurance. The base S-Drive 80i variants start at Group 22 in SE trim, while the X-Drive 20i models are rated between Groups 28 and 30. For S-Drive and X-Drive versions of the 18D diesel, you're looking at Group 23 or 24. The X-Drive 20D is rated at Group 28 or 29. It's a tall order for this X1 to remain the sales leader in this profitable sector, yet the changes made here have given the brand a fighting chance of retaining top spot in the segment. There's a touch of extra class about the product now, infotainment provision is cutting edge, and it's appropriate that the Munich maker has taken a lead with plug-in technology. For most buyers, an X1 would make far more sense than BMW's comparably sized 3 Series Touring, and there aren't too many reasons to pay more for the Bavarian brand's larger X3 model either. As for appeal within this X1's market segment, well, the way it combines practicality, efficiency and a classy cabin means that potential rivals have a real fight on their hands in taking on this car. True, there are a few small problems with ride quality and highway tyre roar, but nothing too significant. Otherwise, the main issue here is one that applies to most of this car's premium segment rivals, namely that opting for one of these requires quite a price stretch if you started out looking at a mainstream branded Qashqai class family-sized SUV, even quite a nice one. Still, make that step and you'll be getting yourself a much higher quality product that'll pay back quite a lot of its price premium at resale time. And in summary, well, we can see why this X1 is the best-selling contender of its kind. The brand might continue to prefer not to call this an SUV, but the truth is that amongst compact models, this X1 continues to epitomise the kind of car that term now defines in today's market. It delivers all the key elements needed from a modern, fashion-led compact family crossover, but also has an essential dose of that BMW want one factor that's done so much for the Munich maker's sales. You'll need to be convinced of that to choose one, but if you are, you'll find this Bavarian model difficult to ignore in this overcrowded sector. The X factor? You might well think this car has it.